Okay, let's call the meeting to order. I am Deputy Mayor Wilson presiding. It's 6:09 p.m. Before we get to our agenda, I'd like to call Drew Heineman to the podium to introduce our newest member to our administrative team.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Wilson and Council. I hope everybody had a great summer and excited to jump right back into things. But one of the important things that I wanted to share today is our new Director of Community Growth, Mark Krasinski. Mark is born and raised Calgarian with a passion for public service. He has more than 20 years of experience or 20 years of municipal government experience with the City of Calgary in a variety of different roles. Most recently, he is responsible for leading the development, implementation, and sustainment of a strategic portfolio of real estate programs tasked with identifying underutilized city lands for sale and alternate municipal use, as well as pursuing opportunities to optimize their value for the City of Calgary and its citizens. Mark has also spent his time with other departments of the City of Calgary, with Parks and Recreation, Corporate Analytics and Innovation, as well as the city's auditor's office. So he brings a diverse experience to our team, and we're excited to have him. In terms of Mark's background, he's a certified internal auditor. He has an MBA focused on strategic planning, urban land economics diploma, as well as a management degree in accounting. So we're really happy to have Mark here, and just want to introduce you to him and welcome to the town of Cochrane. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate getting the formal introduction here, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for joining our team. I guess we can go on to the adoption of the agenda portion, and we actually do have a amendment. If somebody would like to make a motion, Mr. Heineman was looking to do a traffic construction project report later in the agenda. If somebody would like to move that to add it to the agenda. Mr. Reid, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd be happy to move the agenda as amended.
Okay, awesome. Let's call the question. All in favor? So moved. Adoption of previous minutes from July 4th, 2023, Committee of the Whole as attached a long time ago. Is there a motion that somebody that would like to move the minutes from July 4th? Councillor Flowers.
I will move that we adopt the minutes from July 4th.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. All those in favor? Approved. So moving along, no delegations today. We go to 5 for business. Can I call Mr. Mitchell Ham, Director of Community Services, to the podium to begin his presentation? Hi, Mitch.
Good evening, Council.
Quick note, Mitch, before you get going, I failed to mention that Councillor McFadden couldn't join us due to illness tonight, so we will continue on with 6. And please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome back. It's good to see everyone's smiling faces. We're going to jump into Parks and Open Spaces report tonight. So just to get started here, the Parks and Open Spaces is a group of talented and innovative individuals who are invested in Cochrane's outdoor spaces. Just as water, sewer, and public safety are considered essential public services, parks are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life and community. Parks bring economic value to the town, enticing local businesses and community events to choose Cochrane as their location. In fact, quality of parks and landscapes are often cited as one of the top 3 criteria when businesses and events are making location decisions. Parks provides a multitude of health and environmental benefits to the community and individual citizens. Parks are the place that people go to get healthy and stay fit. Improving and promoting places to be physically active increases both physical and mental health. Parks and protected public lands are proven to improve and protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve quality of air that we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, produce habitat for wildlife, and provide a place for children and families to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Parks are a tangible reflection of the quality of life within a community. They provide identity for citizens and are a major factor in the perception of quality of life. Park services are often cited as one of the most important factors of how livable communities are. Parks provide gathering spaces for families and social groups as well as individuals of all ages and economic status, regardless of their ability to pay for access. Over the past decade, Cochrane has experienced steady and at times pronounced growth. This growth has made Cochrane one of the fastest growing and most desirable communities in Western Canada. High value service levels and exceptional customer experiences are two main objectives of which Parks Department prides itself. The rapid rate of growth has created challenges for the Parks Department to be able to consistently provide quality services that meet service level expectations of the community. In 2013, Cochrane's population was just over 18,000 people, and the Parks Department managed 246 hectares. In 2023, Cochrane's population is almost doubled at just under 35,000 people, and the Parks Department now manages 531 hectares. With a community growth rate and the development currently underway, the next 3 years of Cochrane's population is on track to reach over 38,000 people, and the Parks Department will receive an additional 63 hectares of parks and open space. This chart illustrates the quantity of assets the Parks Department manages within the green spaces. When we receive new green spaces from developers, it is everything that comes with providing a high quality area, including all of these amenities. The list is only a portion of our parks assets because we do not have a complete and accurate inventory at this moment. One example of an asset that is unable to manage effectively is irrigation. We currently have 63 in-ground irrigation systems, but are only able to activate 26 systems in a season, and those are just for sports fields. The remaining 37 systems are not activated and are eventually over time abandoned. The ground irrigation is an important asset that helps maintain the quality of our parks and effects of reducing the level of available and operational irrigation in our green spaces, particularly in new communities, is beginning to show. Turf quality is showing decline, young trees are failing to establish, and weeds are becoming more prevalent and difficult to manage. While summer is closing, it is important to note that the Parks Department doesn't have a down season. Once the seasonal staff are finished for the year, full-time staff begin winterizing assets and transitioning equipment to prepare for winter and snow. Currently Parks manages the snow and ice on 80 kilometers of paved pathways and nine town parking lots and half a kilometer of bridges and stairs. Due to the quantity of area being cleared, available equipment and staffing levels is challenged. As the town continues to increase pathways to achieve our strategic goal of better connectivity, safety, accessibility, and timely services, it is critical for us to be successful in this space. Parks' greatest quantity of parks assets, and often one that is managed at the least, are public trees. Between 2019 and 2021, approximately 6,000 of the town-owned trees were inventoried. This inventory represents about 25% of the trees in our green spaces and our roadways. Trees are one of the few assets that actually appreciate and value as they grow older, and having an accurate tree inventory is essential to build and maintain a healthy tree canopy. From an operational standpoint, an accurate inventory helps develop maintenance and management plans, assists in annual budgeting, and from an environmental standpoint, it identifies species diversity, distribution, and canopy coverage, and manages the health and disease and insect outbreaks and hazards. One of the most critical operational tasks for growing and maintaining a healthy urban forest is watering. Summer staff are able to water 100 trees a day. These trees are a combination of trees that Parks has replaced and new trees we receive from developers. It takes 5 years of consistent watering to properly establish a new tree in our community, but that doesn't mean you never have to water it again, obviously. We have been experiencing increasing hot and dry summers, and some trees that have been watered to establishment are showing signs of decline. For example, in this photo of the trees of James Walker Trail, the past 2 summers of intense heat are starting to take their toll. The canopies of these elms are thinning and some of the trees have died. We are receiving hundreds of trees per year in the development community, and watering is an essential component to keep the investment alive and well. Along with all the environmental benefits trees provide, they also bring economic benefit to the town. Tree-lined streets have been found to increase residential property values up to 6% or greater than in similarly sized neighborhoods without trees. The quality of tree canopy and landscapes on approach routes into business districts have been found positively influence visitor perceptions. A healthy urban forest has been proven in several studies to attract visitors and shoppers to downtown business districts. It has been demonstrated that shoppers tend to linger longer and spend more time in business located areas with tree-lined streets. So planning for the future of parks and open spaces. Parks and Open Space team have been listening to council and the community, and council has provided clear guiding principles and shared values to follow. We are inspired by the guiding information in the community, and we are surrounded by passionate people who care deeply about everything from dog parks to baseball diamonds. Our goal is to provide a level of service that is in alignment with service expectations that are guided by policies, bylaws, administrative directives, master plans, and council. In 2024, we will begin a program to improve efficiency, evaluate our assets and amenities, and increase resources to improve the parks and natural community. We will strive for excellence while being prudent, intentional, and fiscally responsible. While resources are a significant component to the improvement of overall operations and maintenance, there are more opportunities to improve as we right-size our department to plan strategically and proactively for the future. Protecting and preserving the open spaces in Cochrane require an active investment, and we have the responsibility to make that investment. That quote was taken from the strategic plan. In summary, Cochrane takes pride in its parks, pathways, and open spaces. As stated in the Cochrane strategic plan, Cochrane is at a crossroads. We are evolving as a vibrant and innovative community while preserving our inherent charm. This requires intentional commitments. Parks and Open Spaces is also at a crossroads, and the 5 priorities of the strategic plan are the fundamental values Parks and Open Spaces operates by. Intentional commitments in parks are necessary in order to continue to deliver the quality of product that the citizens and council of Cochrane are asking us to meet. In closing, we're not coming here today to ask. We're just outlining that if we continue at our current rate, we are meeting the operational needs of our community, but we're not growing. We're not advancing, and we're certainly not acting intentionally. We're mowing grass and we're weed whipping tree lines and fence lines, but we are looking to advance on that. We are looking to create an accurate inventory of our assets. We are looking to improve the way that we operate and intentionally come forward to council with new and cutting edge ideas so that we can continue to advance in this space to lower our costs and improve our efficiencies. But we can't just do that overnight. It takes time, it takes resources, and it takes vision. And we need to create that. Questions?
Thank you for the report, Mr. Ham. It looks like we do have questions from council. Councillor Flowers.
More of a comment. It's obvious that we need more resources in this area. Residents of Cochrane state in every survey how important the parks and pathways are to this community. And then when we look into the future and start developing Fifth Avenue site or the Horse Creek Park, we're gonna need lots of innovative and special ideas to make it the best it can be. So I look forward to getting more ideas from you on how it's gonna work.
On to Councillor Reid.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if I missed it or not, but in the asset category, were dog parks listed as an asset?
In the asset category, dog parks are inventoried because we don't have very many of them.
Okay. And did I hear you reference an asset management program that essentially takes those assets and puts a management program around them in terms of being efficient and forward thinking?
So in coordination with Pinky De La Cruz, who is our asset management director, they are advancing asset management. Our vision is to join in that advancement in asset management by taking that inventory internally and not necessarily having to contract out that inventory, because we do have the staff on the ground to have visibility on these assets.
Okay. And then when I hear terms like at a crossroads, intentional, and cutting edge, it usually is a forewarning or code for a future request for funds. Is that, am I reading that right?
You're reading that correctly, Councillor
Okay.
Reid.
And then last thing I wanted to know is the Horse Creek Park, is that part of this asset management program, or is that a separate project completely?
It'll be a separate project because once a tangible capital asset is one that has been advanced to completion, and up until that point, it's just a marker on our capital plan.
So that really, in terms of the bottom line, in terms of dollars and cents, the Horse Creek project is one thing, and then your request for what potentially will be a additional crossroads, intentional, cutting edge dollars, it would be something separate then, is that it?
The additional 63 hectares of space that we've identified has included the amount of park space that we would receive as a part of Horse Creek Sports Park over the next 3 years. And so we made some assumptions that that project would be moving forward, but that's included in this vision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On to Councillor Federico.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of similar to Councillor Reid, I'm just curious, I imagine part of this is a capital ask as well as an operational ask in this upcoming budget?
I think that we'll reserve the capital asks as part of the capital program and through that process. What we're trying to establish here is essentially an operational need and identify it for council. It's council's prerogative, and we do understand that there are a lot of competing priorities in the community and the organization, and so this is just informational. And yes, we would like to advance concepts of increases, but we also understand the competing priorities.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes down to if we're kind of anticipating, Horse Creek Park and things like that, but if we don't know about our financials in the background, whether or not that project goes ahead, rather than, obviously bringing on more resources operationally to figure out whether or not projects are actually going to go through to begin with before we end up, anticipating that a project's happening and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that the best way to describe it is we are currently overextended, and increases are going to further overextend us.
Councillor Nagel.
I was actually quite happy to hear that watering's on your radar. I've noticed this past summer actually that a number of spots in town do look like the trees were dying. Probably the one that sticks out in my mind the most is on the Bow Ridge Field, where I used to live and I grew up there. I drove up there for some reason this summer and saw trees that were probably 20 or 30 years old were all turning brown, like half of them were dead. So do we have a request coming forward to increase watering capacity in Cochrane? Because I assume, as you said, these problems with trees not getting watered enough is a problem all over the community.
Thank you, Councillor Nagel. That's actually one of our capital requests this year, is an additional water truck as a part of our regular capital request program.
And then another question of something I thought of this summer, has there been any thought about an education program to residents that front onto a boulevard with trees to help with maintenance? Because for example, in my home, there's this public space in front of my house that has grass and a tree, and whenever I'm out watering my own stuff, I also do that patch. I can see nobody else in the neighborhood does it, and it's like if community members would just take an extra few seconds to help take care of that while they're taking care of their own stuff, it makes a really big difference. Have we thought about a little door hanger education program to help get residents to help us with this stuff?
One of the ways that we've considered advancing this concept is developing an Adopt a Park program, and so that people wanted to advance into this space and maintain a small boulevard or a small segment of land that is manageable from an individual perspective, that we would be able to move in that direction. Unfortunately, we have some policies that require our attention ahead of that.
Good. All right, that's it. Thanks.
I just had one question for the presenter. Mitch, Shirley, in your slides, there was one slide that caught my attention about the 2013 to 2023 comparison of employees in the parks space. Are you able to go back to that slide?
Yeah, I omitted it from the final edit. I just never made it to this. I felt as though that was significantly too pointed for a discussion like this. We were trying to have a more open discussion around the requirements and the need, and felt as though identifying the staffing challenges could have. I just don't want to address it so directly. Staffing is part of an operational context, and we certainly need staffing, an increased staffing complement to deal with the vastness of our community. And so I think that should come through the operational budget, not necessarily make council feel like you have to make that decision in this moment.
Excellent, thank you. I just had one question about, in regards to this, you mentioned a program to increase efficiencies in 2024. Any general comments about where we think we're gonna find those, or is it too early to tell? That was my only question with this.
So the advancement of the new water truck would come with a water meter, so we would be able to identify how much water we're using and increase the pace at which we're delivering that to the root systems of the trees, as well as we're looking at different ways to work with our teams, including spreading out our seasonal staff complement to get a more efficient look over a 7-day-a-week profile. And we have some additional ideas around policy development so that we can reduce the amount of activity in naturalized areas while focusing on the health of the tree canopy.
Good, thank you very much. We appreciate that presentation on behalf of council. Thank you. I won't ask you, I'm asking you to come right back for the next report, I suppose. We'll stay right where we are. 5B, Soccer Dome report from administration. Please take it away, Mr. Ham.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Welcome back. So on April 17th, there was a delegation by the Cochrane Sanctuary Project. They brought forward a delegation to explain a need in the community for a soccer dome, and council asked administration to bring back a report on that delegation. Just a quick snapshot of that. They were looking for something that was similar to the dome in Edmonton, that was in that same kind of size range. They used the Edmonton Scottish Dome as a notable comparison for what they would bring to Cochrane. The dome would be used for multiple sports, including football, rugby, lacrosse, and potentially others. They would prefer a FIFA quality pro turf. The estimated build cost based on their information was $3.8 million. The estimated revenue per year during peak winter hours would have been $400,000 per year, and the estimated operational cost is about $140,000 per year based on the information that was provided. As a part of that delegation, they were looking for land, and we're going to proceed with potential donations and other aspects of raising money for the project, and then looking for what our preferences are for that land location. And council left us with that question as well. And hopefully I can address that throughout this presentation. So the dome comparisons that we used were these four. Edmonton Scottish Dome, which was provided by the Sanctuary Project. We used Calgary Shoaldice because it's very close, has very similar weather conditions and proximity. The Red Deer Dome because, again, close in proximity, Alberta-based, and the Calgary West Soccer, which is the closest one in proximity to Cochrane. The cost and dimensions of each of these comparisons. So Edmonton Scottish Dome was built in 2018. The cost to build all in was about $7 million. The size of it is 135,000 square feet, and it's not owned by the municipality. It is owned by Edmonton Scottish Society, and that is a soccer society. The second one that we used was Calgary Shoaldice Dome. It's a seasonal dome, and so they put it up in October and they take it down in May. It was built the first time it was built was in 2019. The cost was $8.5 million for the dome only, and the turf itself was a special project, and so we didn't want to use it as a comparison because they turned it into a stormwater management system as well as a turf field. The size is 136,000 square feet, and the City of Calgary is the owner of this particular one. The third one was the Red Deer Dome. It was built in 2022 by a private entity, the Dome Sports Limited, and it was $8 million to build. The size is about 107,000 square feet, and it's currently operating in Red Deer. And then the Calgary West Soccer Dome was built in 2004. It's actually reaching its life cycle point right now. It's one of the questions that they have on the table of whether they're going to stay in that location or move to a new location, as far as I understood from our conversations. The cost was $4 million to build, not including the land, which was donated by the City of Calgary, and the size of that one is 90,000 square feet, which when you go inside, you can really tell the difference in the spacing because the walls are quite close to the field sides. So the field layout comparisons, the majority of them, Edmonton Scottish, Shoaldice, and West Soccer are laid out in some degree like the picture on the left. Full-size field in the middle with then broken into quarters and can be also used lengthwise in thirds. Then the Red Deer field, they also have full soccer field as well as half soccer fields, and they also put in 2 baseball facilities as well as batting cages into that facility. The amenities offered, Edmonton Scottish has a running track on the outside with a netting between the soccer and the running track, as well as a premium turf surface, a lounge, and washrooms, change rooms and washrooms. Calgary Shoaldice has washrooms located outside, but no change rooms, and it's not part of the inside facility. It's connected to, and it's kind of the walkthrough that you go into the dome. If you've been inside a dome, there's an obvious air feeling that you feel when you walk through the turnstile. Red Deer Dome has baseball fields, batting cages, athletic gyms, multi-purpose rooms, a cafe, and change rooms and washrooms. It's quite a full-service place, and it has amenities set up to meet the needs of many user groups. And then Calgary West is the new, or is a FIFA quality, has a new FIFA quality pro turf, and then an eating area and a change in washrooms. So costs to consider. So what we learned was the utilities alone is estimated to roughly between $30,000 and $40,000 per month on a 12-year basis or 12-month basis. What this means is that obviously it's quite heavy in the wintertime to heat, and the utility cost of heating a dome of the nature of Calgary Soccer is roughly about $80,000 in a cold winter month like January or February, but obviously dissipates throughout the rest of the year to operate. The staffing is really dependent on the services offered and the length of time that it's open and the recreational facility that needs. In some cases, the staffing is 2 people on staff to operate. In some cases, it's more than that. We went on we took a fairly low estimate in this space just to make sure that we're not overinflating the operational cost, and so we used a cost of staffing estimated about $400,000 per year based on 4 staff members to fulfill the needs of that facility on a 16-hour open basis. If we were to shadow that down into just evenings, that could be reduced, but we were also mindful that if we were looking to use this as an amenity space, that we wanted to think about this holistically. There's also the life cycle. Most domes life cycle at about 15 to 20 years, and so you'd be looking at possibly turf and dome replacement every 15 to 20 years, in some cases 25. Specialized equipment needed. There is specialized equipment needed to maintain the turf. It's not just something that you leave. You have to rake it and manage it appropriately to improve the life cycle and make it last as long as possible. Snow removal on the outside is very important and very labor intensive, and if you don't have the correct spacing elements, it can provide a lot of challenges to move the snow away from the dome. It's actually one of the most detrimental pieces is that if snow starts to pile up on the side of the dome, it will actually collapse the dome. And then parking is just the space needed on top of the potential 125,000 square feet of area of parking to assist this space. The benefits. It provides year-round training for soccer, lacrosse, rugby, and anyone else that can use this facility and book this facility with time allotment. The potential for multi-use sports fields is endless. We could play cricket in there. It has a lot of opportunity for options. Oops. Families can stay and play local. They don't have to travel to other municipalities to play soccer in the wintertime, which a lot of families are choosing to do that so their kids can get a 12-month access to soccer. And it increases safety for players because they have high quality turf, high quality environment, and people in situations where people are running on even surfaces and expected outcomes. Other events can be held in the dome. It doesn't have to just be about one community or one user group. We can have events in there. We can have concerts in there. There is options for throughout in terms of creating a space that is open access for anyone. The challenges. Land and location. One of the things that's really challenging about finding a space that can accommodate up to 140,000 square feet is that finding a level piece of land that can accommodate that and that doesn't have any impediments that's going to cause challenges is very challenging in our community. We don't have a lot of land that is flat that it can accommodate a space like this. The size of land required is quite large, and it's not easily marked out with our current topography. It would impact sightlines for Cochranites. So no matter where you put this in town, it has an opportunity to block sightlines of what view the majestic view that we all move here for, come here for, and look at day after day. And then the other part is do we have the population to support it? Are 35,000 people, 40,000 people enough to support a dome of this size? And how many players and how many user groups do we have to be invested in this space for it to be successful? And that requires feasibility, and we can probably understand that much more greatly through our recreation needs assessment. So, observations. So the recreation needs assessment will help determine the need. It's part of what we're trying to understand about our community is what are the needs for recreation in our community, and expending that energy and time in that space and understanding that revolving around all user groups is actually going to help us guide development. It's going to help us guide projects and help us plan for the future. There are 2 air domes within 30 minutes of Cochrane. Calgary West and Shoaldice are 30 minutes from here, and they're accessible. If teams want to play there, they can book that time. It's not just for Calgarians. It's for anyone that is willing to book and pay the money to use those spaces. Does Cochrane's population support the need? Red Deer's population is substantially larger than ours, and they just got their first dome in 2022. And then Horse Creek Sports Park is actually a very challenging site. It's not level, and it's going to require a lot of engineering to get that site in a way that is going to meet the principles of the decisions that were made by this council and the Parks and Recreation Committee to fit the elements that have been identified as a part of that project. And adding in a project like this would drastically change the outlook of that project and probably increase the cost based on the amount of land that we would need to level to accommodate a space like this. So we've come with a few recommendations. It's a challenging situation to recommend if I'm being honest, because there's a lot of competing information out there right now, but it's nothing solidified with councils. But continuing to look for opportunities for a dome in future years, we can develop a 10-year capital plan and identify this as an opportunity on it and bring this forward, and council can decide whether they want to move it forward or move it back. It does not have to be solidified as a 10-year outlook. It's just about trying to create a more reasonable expectation. I'm not saying that the sanctuary project came to the table asking for money from council or from the community. I think that what we're trying to identify is that even if we were to find a suitable land location for the dome, that there is a potential for high cost that would need some sort of input from the town at some point. The other option that we're offering up is looking for joint opportunities with Rocky View County and Airdrie and create a more regional-based aspect to build something like this that would have a more suitable land location, a more cost-effective opportunity, and work with communities having multiple opportunities to bring user groups forward and advance teams into these spaces and user groups into these spaces and have more people on these spaces at all times. The combined populations of those 3 municipalities and the combined space of those municipalities would make it accessible for all, and if the parameters were set up right, the user groups would have access to it when they need, how they need. That concludes my presentation. This was a very interesting challenge to bring forward, because the question that was brought to us by council was, where would we put this? And right now in Cochrane, we don't have a suitable land location that can support 125,000 square foot level area for a soccer dome that isn't currently being used by a user group. So we tried to bring forward a multitude of information and broadness of information to give you a bigger picture, a better picture of how we're perceiving the situation, that we are open to comment. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Ham. Very interesting, and I appreciate you coming back to council with those answers. It looks like we have a couple questions. Start with Councillor Nagel.
It sounds like space is one of the major considerations here, as you just summarized with that point. So I can visualize it. We're talking 125,000 square feet. We're talking about, it's basically 4 full soccer fields plus parking plus any sort of bathrooms and clubhouse. That's kind of the size of this thing.
It wouldn't equate to 4 full-size soccer fields. The way that they envision it is having the center field as being a full-size soccer field, but having the elements of 4 fields that run in a quadrant, or 3 that run lengthways, like crossways.
Can we see the picture? Can I see the picture again?
Yeah. So you can see on the left photograph there, there's a full-size soccer field in the center, but then there's 4 fields that are in the quadrants. And then another option that is offered is 3 width-wise soccer fields that run the width of the dome. And so that it can lay out in several different ways to optimize for the user groups.
Okay, thanks. That was my only question.
On to Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. 2 questions. One point I have had is a lot of experience in the West Soccer Dome with one of my grandkids playing soccer there. And it does take up, I think it's only 90,000 square feet, that one, isn't it?
That particular one
It
is
still
90.
takes up, if anybody's been there, it's at the bottom end of Tuscany, just the north side of the river. And the parking lot alone has a pretty big footprint. So the original estimate that we heard and what I think I'm hearing you say is quite a gap between what was like 3.8 and where you're at, which sounds like 3 or 4 times that price, leaving it even the land alone, right, with operations and so on. Am I hearing that right?
We did our very best to find relatable information from the entities that have built domes recently, so we have a more accurate cost estimate, as well as reaching out to some of the providers of these spaces. The Sanctuary Dome project had identified one contractor that they would prefer to use in this space, and they were a lower of the estimates of some of the others, but we wanted to bring a more conservative estimate, as it were.
Right, yeah, and having a little experience, not necessarily with buying domes, but with contractors, there's always the bait and switch that you have to deal with. Are there any communities of our size that have a dome in Alberta or Western Canada?
In Western Canada, there are no examples of communities of under 40,000 people that have domes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Flowers.
Yeah, I was just thinking about other partners that might be interested, but they'd be even further away, Morley or Banff and Canmore. I didn't realize Tuscany had one that close. It would be only about 20 minutes to get there. So that's probably not a good option, but yeah, I wish we had more land, and we don't quite have the population to afford it, so it would be good to keep it on the radar and for the future.
On to Councillor Federico.
Thank you. I like the idea of the joint partnership. I'm just curious, what messaging are you going back to the Cochrane Woes with now? Or are you going back with any sort of messaging of maybe perhaps what they could pursue on their own, or what we could do to work with them about a partnership idea?
Yeah, I think what we'd like to do is revisit with them a conversation around how we were going to establish funding for this and make this a sustainable project, and then also reach out to our partners and see what's happening in those spaces. I know that this isn't the only community in the region that is having this conversation, and it's very early on in the conversation, so nothing has been established in that space, and that's why I think it's an opportune period to reach out and look for a joint opportunity.
Perfect. And I guess maybe if you can just keep us apprised as to when that conversation happens with them, so that we kind of close the loop on knowing what that discussion is, and if there's any additional conversation coming forward from conversation that you have either with them or from a joint partnership type of response.
Absolutely.
That looks like all the questions from around the council table. I had one financial question I was thinking about, Mr. Ham, as I was listening to the presentation. I know when we heard this from the previous presenter, it sounded like it was about a 15-year return on investment to break even, which was the approximate lifespan of the dome you were talking about. And with the new financial numbers I just saw there, it looks like it's more of 15 years to recover about half of your cost with what you've calculated. I think I'm in about the right ballpark there. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we use some conservative estimates around just based on what we know. The Shoaldice Dome, just to raise, is roughly $1.5 million a year. Raise and lower, about $1.5 million a year. It's a seasonal dome, and so just to raise a dome is $1.5 million before you purchase the turf, which we We have just installed a turf in our community at $1.2 million, and that wasn't a FIFA grade turf. That was an upgraded turf, but not FIFA grade. And so we do have some examples of where these costs are implemented. So if you look at 1.2 for turf and 1.5, we're already at 2.7 before we implement the dome and operational costs.
Yep, okay, well, thank you very much. It sounds to me like it's going to take some more thought and discussion to meaningfully move forward. It does sound like a intermunicipal collaboration could be of utility. I know at one point I served on the CMRB rec committee, and this was the kind of project that was talked about quite a bit around that board, is you know, a utility between the members where you could actually, I think this is the exact kind of project that would be useful to be discussing with the neighbors like you talked about. So there's takeaways here for council, and we appreciate the presentation. It looks like it's generated one more question from Councillor Nagel before we turn it over.
Not questions, just wanted to add my 2 cents
Please.
on kind of wrapping up where I'm at with the conversation. I think we're all a little bit disappointed that it wasn't, you know, it doesn't seem like it's going to be like a too good to be true, so cheap we have to do it, but you know, that would have been too good to be true. So I also think at the same time, though, I don't want the conversation to die and just stop here because we're saying it's pretty expensive. Like, we have a lot of pressure on our current recreation capacity with more to come in the future. And I still think that this seems like a really good solution to consider in the mix, because as you pointed out, it's not just soccer, it could be rugby, it could be lacrosse, it could be any number of activities. So I hope we keep this in mind as we look to update our 10-year capital strategy and set some long-term capital goals here in Cochrane, because I would like to see this at some point be on the books. But
Excellent point, Councillor Nagel, and hopefully a partner in the process could make it more feasible. That would be excellent. We appreciate the presentation, Mr. Ham, and on behalf of council, thank you for bringing it forward to us.
Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful night.
According to our amended agenda here, we have a 5D now. Mr. Heineman was going to come to the podium and give us a traffic construction report, which is, oh, I missed 5C. Pardon me, not quite yet. Okay, pardon me. 5C is our expense policy guiding principles from Mr. Derricott. We don't want to jump the gun. Thank you, Mr. Derricott, for pointing that out.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wilson. As council will, I'm sure, recall, earlier this year there was some public dialogue around expenses here at the town of Cochrane, and following that, a notice of motion brought forward to review the expense policies for council. And so this is the beginning of that process. Although it was originally on an agenda earlier in the summer, it was bumped forward to now. I'm looking forward to getting some feedback, as it says here, on the guiding principles as we review and potentially build some new policy here for council regarding expenses. I believe I covered most of this in what I just talked about here, and so let's jump in. So today what we're looking for is to gather some as we termed here, some guiding principles that council would like to see shape the expense policy here. Obviously supporting our ongoing commitment to transparent and responsible governance, while also allowing council to do the business required of them to fulfill their role in operating the municipality. So some proposed guiding principles for council consideration are as follows. So 1 being transparency and accountability, ensuring that our constituents have a clear view of how public funds are utilized to advance the community's development. 2, stewardship of resources. Every dollar spent is a deliberate investment in the betterment and future of our community. And 3, adaptability to change. Our expense policy will remain adaptable, enabling us to respond to evolving needs and seize opportunities that arise as our community flourishes. Some of the topics obviously for consideration here are some of the practical pieces of the expense policy. How do we handle the elements associated with travel, associated with council doing business, meals that are often a part of relationship building and engagement, are necessary as council travels for conferences or meetings with other orders of government. Accommodations obviously come along with those pieces as well. And how do we ensure that we prioritize budget-conscious options aligned with conducting the business of the municipality and allow to strategically engage with driving council's objectives forward. And then travel itself, getting to and from places, we want to balance accessibility and necessity, and that our approach reflects our commitment to being efficient and purposeful when we undertake those activities. As a part of the early stages of this process, we did take an opportunity to review some comparable municipalities to gather some other practices. The 5 that you'll see laid out here in a moment in a handy chart include the City of Airdrie, Okotoks, Leduc, Spruce Grove, and Fort Saskatchewan, some of our key comparables in terms of population and proximity to large centers. One note here is that there is a variety of language you'll see around guiding entities that set rates for mileage and per diems for meals, etc. The National Joint Council, the Canadian Revenue Agency, and Government of Alberta are 3 that have emerged there. Each policy is obviously nuanced. They all have their pieces that are unique to their communities as part of that, and so I'm just pointing that out as we go forward to take a look here. We did want to highlight, for one, the National Joint Council, as it was something that was new to me even as we did this research. It's a collaborative platform which unites government, management, and employee groups. At the federal level, it shapes policies for fair employment, harmonious work conditions, and equitable compensation. So it handles a broad array of issues. I think the part that is of interest there is under the equitable compensation piece that they do set some guidelines on reimbursement of expenses as part of that. Wanted to highlight an example. There's a number of ones, and I know that this was highlighted in some of the previous conversations, is we anticipate that at minimum one of the outcomes of this is some improved reporting for council expenses online, where the public will be able to go in and see and monitor how each council member is engaging in their activities as a councillor and the associated expenses with that. This one comes from the City of Calgary, and this covers a broader council budget. This isn't an individual budget, it's the mayor's office, but we did just want to grab it and show what it can show there. If you see, it basically shows the budget expenditures to date and the remaining or unspent budget, and then it does give a fairly detailed listing of the expenses that have gone through this particular budget in the time frame associated as a part of that. So if you do go to a number of those websites, Spruce Grove and Airdrie and Okotoks, you can see that each municipality has a little bit of a different flavor on how they show council expenses. We certainly feel like we have an opportunity to enhance the work here, although it has been done and it is available. I think there can be some improvements made there. So we have 3 main questions for council. How does council, what's important to council, and how does council want an online reporting disclosure to look? And number 2, what is council's envisioned approach regarding the allocation of funds for training and development? This would be include things like conference attendance or courses and other educational opportunities that council might pursue. And then what specific approach does council wish to implement in regards to the I guess, again, the more practical pieces, the regards to travel and accommodation and the associated expenses that come with those activities. And I think at that point, I'll leave those questions up there on the pause, but it would be great to turn this over to council for some dialogue. Obviously, happy to answer some questions. Administration hoping to get some guidance. The next steps would be, obviously, we'll take the feedback we get from this. We'll devise a policy document that reflects those, and then bring that back to a future committee of the whole meeting for some additional conversation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Derricott. See if it'll generate any conversation around the table here. start with Councillor Flowers.
I guess the first thing that comes into my mind is being somewhere in the middle, because we usually do that, whether it's staff wages or whatever we're working on. So we don't want to be too cheap so that people aren't getting reimbursed for their expenses, but we don't want to be over the top and be spending too much. So somewhere in the middle, to me, makes sense. I like the idea of using things that are working for other places, or the National Joint Council, if you can get things from that. And I think with the training and development, I just think it needs to be fair for all levels of staff, whether they're new or been here for a long time, or it's council. Everybody benefits from some kind of training. So I don't know what that looks like. I just think it needs to be fair.
Yeah, thank you. Just to, if I may comment on that last part there, one of the approaches that we saw was for council to just have a set amount. I believe it was $6,000. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was Okotoks or Leduc, but in one of those comparable municipalities, where they just set out basically a criteria under which training and development budget could be used, and there was an amount, $6,000, and then each council member chose how they would use or not use those dollars as part of it. For example, things like AUMA, I think AB Munis is what we're supposed to call it now, FCM attendance and or other associated courses or training. Each council member then gets to determine where they would allocate those dollars as part of it, and it would just be also reported on as part of that disclosure piece.
Okay, moving on to Councillor Federico, please.
I do have one question. Under the chart, and it talks about the comparables, it says, under Cochrane, it says about meal reimbursement, that it's reasonable cost, including tax and gratuity. But when I pulled up one of the FOIPs, it actually, under number 801-01, it says that they should not exceed $60 per day. I'm just curious as to, it looks like, was there a policy change that I'm unaware of? But it does say $60.
Yes, thank you for the question there. I will just have to verify that policy document, ensure I give you the correct information there.
Okay, and then I'll go on to kind of your questions that you have up there. How does council want online reporting? I think it needs to be as detailed for our department, as well as probably CAO's department, as clearly as possible with as much detail as possible. I'd also like to just throw out there that perhaps rather than just having one person as the mayor sign off, that we also include the deputy mayor to sign off, so that we have more than one set of eyes on some of the things that are going on. So that would be one suggestion. From a training perspective, I'm not sure if this is talking about like organizationally wide, or if we're talking more about the council
Yeah,
side
so
of things.
thank you. Just for this purposes, we intended to speak about council's training. Yeah.
For council, I believe Councillor McFadden had one time talked about, whether or not if you weren't going to use your funds, if somebody else was going to do some sort of form of training, whether or not those funds could be slid over or whatever that looks like. And I'd like to remove it from the mayor's discretion as to whether or not that training is appropriate for that particular councillor. I think that's really up to us as individual councillors to be able to defend publicly or to talk about what we're taking for training. It really shouldn't be contingent on one person, what one person's opinion is. And in regards to travel and accommodation, first of all, I think that council needs to have a bigger conversation as to what type of travel is going to be coming up in the upcoming year beforehand, so that we're not surprised that, we're learning about trips on the fly. I think that conversation needs to happen ahead of time. And when it comes to travel and the accommodation piece, I believe Councillor Nagel had one time said that provincial government-wise, like they actually have like a certain radius where, you don't necessarily take on accommodations if you're staying within, I don't even know, 60K or 100K within that particular conference. And I think that is something that I like to adopt. I understand that people get busy, but when you're starting to take on hotel rooms at, $300-400 a night for conferences, when you could easily take an Uber or cab for a quarter of that price. The whole idea is that we need to be obviously, it's not about cutting corners so tight, but this is not our money. It is taxpayer money, and I think that we need to be very conscientious of how we're spending it and what we're spending it on.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the principles of the municipality that identified the, again, the amount of money, $6,000 in this case, was that each individual council basically had discretion on that. It was there, and then it was reported by the councillor, and then that would need to be, like you said, defended by each individual council members. I do believe that there was some general criteria in terms of it needing to be in the business of the municipality. You couldn't go buy a big screen TV, be on council for a couple of years and buy a big screen TV because no one's looking or anything like that, obviously. But loosely give some criteria and then let each council member make those discretionary choices was one of those principles.
Okay, on to Mayor Janung.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the update today and the opportunity to give some feedback. From my point of view, I think the policy needs to be clear, just clear operating guidelines to do the business of the community. I mean, you kind of outlined that in your report, but I mean, generally, I think we have an understanding of what we're trying to achieve in a budget year, and having the operational funding to be able to achieve that is what we require. I believe the current policy is close. Obviously, it needs tweaking and updating and modernizing, which I think is the genesis of the notice of motion from Councillor Wilson, so I appreciate that. But I think it's a good framework to start from, and I don't think we need to throw it out and start over. I think it's something we can tweak and add on and build off of. So I think it's a good framework. As far as reporting, I think we've already improved on our reporting, as you've outlined. But I agree it needs to be clear to each of us what the spending is, and so we should be able to go online and find that fairly readily, what the Q1 costs were for each council person. I would like to see like a GL code for each council member. I think right now we have a general council fund, and I'd like it split out into individuals. So then people could actually go, and I think it's part of that reporting that then there's a GL code that each of us would have to report on, and then it'd be clear to be able to bring that up. Check. And I think it needs to be simple. I like the idea that you brought forward there of having, and maybe it's following, I think it's Okotoks or Leduc maybe you referenced, where it's just a general fund. And each council person could then determine where they want to have the spending, and we don't have to break it into A, B munis or FCM. Or I like the notion of that, and I think I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues think of that. But I think there still needs to be a reporting mechanism and a clear criteria of what the funding is required or supposed to be used for, and then it's up to council to spend that where they feel is the best interest of the community. So clear criteria, reporting mechanism, and simple. And I think adding other layers and extra reporting, I think, I mean, obviously we want to be transparent, but I want to also be mindful of red tape and not getting so bogged down in our own reporting over a couple of $1,000s a year in what we're attempting to do to try to move forward the business of the community. So I think there's a balancing act that's required there.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Janung. A few thoughts as you shared some of yours there. One is that the budget task force has also been talking about how this is reflected in the budget, including those kind of individual councillor GLs. So I think those overlap quite a bit and will help make that reporting a lot more linear and easier to do. Also associated with that, as we've grown as an organization and as a municipality, I think one of those kind of holdovers from being a smaller community has been a lot of council's activities were just lumped into a single budget, and so there may need to be a little bit of work to differentiate the difference between what is a general council activity and what is an individual councillor activity, and accounting for those properly, I think would also be a part of that process. If the community hosts another community or something like that, that's likely getting, that's going to be a general council activity versus that of an individual councillor. So, but I think that's an important and relatively easy exercise to do that will just give further clarity at the individual level.
If I may, Deputy Mayor, the one other thing that I would add, and this is connected but separate, I think, from the expense policy. I think we need to do a better job also of reporting on costs associated, say, with mid-sized city mayors, where we do get an allocation to offset the expenses that we incur. So how we report on that needs to be clearer too, so that I think in the past and where we've maybe got hung up in some of the questions from residents is, why did this expense occur? And really it was offset from monies that we were getting from that organization. So as an example, I think we need to just do a better job of how we're reporting on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. That triggered another thing that I really appreciated. And again, I apologize. I don't remember specifically which of those 5 communities I saw this at. I think Airdrie, but also on their council disclosure page, it listed some of their advocacy priorities and some of their work. Like, what is this expenditure actually supporting council in doing? Because I think it's really important that as part of the responsible expenditures here is, it would be sometimes easy to get a little bit of gun shy in terms of spending, you know, these public resources that are obviously sensitive, and not expend those dollars for fear of how it may appear, when those funds are actually being used to further the interests of the municipality. And connecting those more clearly as part of that process, I think would be really, really helpful. So that if a contingent of our council is going to Edmonton, for example, to meet with a minister to discuss an important file that we're working on, that the residents can also see that that's a part of the expenditure as well, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I love that idea. This council's been quite vocal in supporting intergovernmental advocacy as an example. I would hate to see us cut back on that initiative, and I think it's proving its worth in the dividends that we're getting through you know, all the upgrades that we're seeing and the funding from the province. So it's again a balancing act of not cutting off our hand to spite our foot, or whatever that saying is.
Nose to spite our face. There, yeah.
I'll just end it there, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
On to Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I don't know what more I can add to the conversation that hasn't already been said, other than to say that I think the original notice of motion was simply to move forward the review of this policy sooner than later. And I think that was the intent of it, which I appreciate it, because I think there's a lot there that is good, and it just needs to be tweaked. I'd also like to say that, you know, at least my perception is that we are good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, that there has been no abuse here. And I would challenge anybody, including my colleagues, to be able to speak to that if they think that there is. But from my perspective, I don't think there is. I think that we've done a good job in terms of managing the resources that we've been allocated and doing, I think, our citizens well. I will our citizens well. For me, when this first came up as a draft in July, I just happened to have the opportunity of being on the government website looking at some of the ministers. I guess really their portfolios, but really a summary, and right on there it indicates what expenses they've made in that particular quarter or time or period, and I thought that was really useful in terms of doing that for each of us individually. The two other things I would say is that, so that I appreciate that in terms of the online reporting, but I also think it should be simplified. Again, this is, not that I know it all, but in a previous life experience when I worked at a university in Ontario, Brock University, we came with a policy where we were going to detail all this stuff, and we ended up assessing that and discovering that for every $100 we were spending, we had $1,000 we were using and tracking those $100. And so for me, that's not wise in terms of being able to be transparent. If we're going to be transparent, let's talk about what it's going to cost a taxpayer in terms of doing that. So I'd hate to become so micromanaged in terms of doing that that it just becomes ridiculous, right? The other thing I would say is that, again, in a previous life, when I was on town council in Athabasca, we have a council member asked to fund their post-secondary education. And it was kind of gray in terms of being able to justify that. And so council voted on it and decided not to proceed with that it was not a good return on investment for that particular council or that council member. It created some hard feelings, admittedly, but I think generally the public supported that. They didn't see that as a wise investment in terms of their community and taxpayer dollars. On the other hand, I think that there should be an allocation per counselor, and they should be accountable for that allocation. I don't think it should be a pool of funds for all of council, but individual funds, and that we become responsible for how those funds are appropriately spent. Again, I don't know what the dollar amount is. I see that, as you pointed out, I think it's Okotoks that has $6,000. We have $2,500. I don't know what the right number is, but I think that there should be an appropriate associated number with that. In terms of travel and accommodation, I don't have any particular strong feelings one way or the other. I just think we have business to do, and I would hate to think that any of it would be prohibited because we were so short-sighted in terms of being able to recognize the potential goal that we couldn't accommodate that or deal with that. And the last thing I would say is there are occasions when things do come up, right, as in life, where we may need to bring something back to council that's kind of outside the norm. So, for example, if a counselor is allocated $2,500 and the opportunity is such that it's actually $3,500, we don't want to live strictly by that policy. We should be able to come back as a council and say, there's a one-time, one-off. And I'm not embarrassed or bothered by defending that in a public forum. So those would be kind of my comments. But again, I think that we're heading in the right direction. I think we moved the policy forward. I think it needs a little bit of tweaks, but I honestly believe and publicly happy to say that I think we've been good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. A few things there. One is I just wanted to add as well that each year our expenses are audited as well as part of the audit process where they go by and review theirs, and there hasn't been any flags raised that would support, as you described, the town of Cochrane, I think, as a good steward of public funds, and there's I think we can demonstrate that as well. I had two thoughts there, but one has escaped me, so I'll see if it comes back to me. I knew I should have noted it, but appreciate the feedback, Councillor Reid.
On to Councillor Nagel.
Thanks for this opportunity to comment on this. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. It is, for me, not about the budget, because these expenses are generally quite a small part of our budget, but it's about public trust. Because in my perspective, the public sees all this money we're spending on these other budgetary items, but then they take their cues from how we're doing our expenses to how respectful we are of their dollars. So when these expenses are felt to be not super responsible, it leaves people to wonder how responsible we are about everything else. For the general approach, I would not be in favor of a middle of the road approach. I would instead prefer to be among the most cheapest or stringent among all government comparables. So I'd like to look at mid-sized cities, big cities, provincial government and federal government, look at all their expenses, and then find like the cheapest common denominator between all of them for how they do things. And then, because that to me is like super defensible. So, well, we have like the most responsible expense policy out of all the other governments. And so then I think anything we were doing would then be totally defensible. In terms of the discretion of which expenses are approved, I think I heard Councillor Federico mention that it shouldn't be up to the mayor to sign on training or something. I think there should be consistency between the expense decisions. So if the mayor is asked to decide on what meal, travel, and accommodation expenses are reasonable, then I think that same consistency should be applied to training and training education as well. But then I think we should have a mechanism in place that if a councillor disagrees with the mayor's expense request, that there's a way to challenge it, either through a public motion or something like that. But it's like, let's say somebody wants to do a chorus, the mayor says, hey, I don't know about this one, maybe we should go ask the rest of the group, and we do it through a motion, so have the group decide. And then also I think if we were to get into stuff like that, there should maybe some discussion in the policy about pre-approval of expenses, because I haven't done a whole lot of expenses, so I don't really know how often it is that somebody goes and pays for something, but it's not actually reimbursed. So there should be a clear expectation set about pre-approval of expenses as well. And then also something that the mayor mentioned, I believe in just a casual conversation about this, is that there's some misunderstanding about who was involved in what meals. And so I think there should be something in our policy that when people of an equal rank, i.e. all of mayor and council, or people in the same tier of an org chart are out for a meal together, there should be individualized reporting So like the example that I think I heard is like the mayor picked up, I think like a Christmas party or something like that for the members of council, and then that all ended up on the mayor's expense report when actually I think a handful of councilors were out for a Christmas dinner before our holiday. So that should be, I think you said a code, it should be allocated out individually. And then I've just got some notes here I'm reading through because there's a lot to process. And then also in regards to the general approach to travel and accommodation, I much prefer a per diem for food as opposed to a direct expense that, you know, give somebody like $40 or $50, whatever the standard is. And then if they want to eat Subway, good for them. If they want to go out for dinner with people from the conference, have at it. And then for accommodations, I don't think we should send people to the ghetto in like the cheapest possible hotel, but we should definitely, I think, have some sort of language about a middle of the road accommodation choice. I know conferences, they often say, well, here's some recommended accommodations. We could just say, use the cheapest of the recommended accommodations because they don't normally recommend like dumps. And then on the last thing, on the topic of meals, my personal perspective is that I don't think it's very often necessary to have a meal for a business meeting. And personally, I feel that's a very old school way of doing business. But like I'm a remote contractor outside of council, so in my world, like you just send somebody a Zoom link and you just talk shop and then you click end and you go to the next meeting. But if I was never really, when this became a topic of public conversation, I was never really clear on how many meals were being expensed. Because like if it's something that's already being handled very well within discretion, then I don't know how much more finessing of that policy we need. But if it's something that is being done quite regularly, then I think it does need more stringent regulations put on it. Do we know the number of meals that were expensed in the town of Cochrane?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nagel. I certainly don't have that number off the top of my head. There's currently, I don't believe that there is currently any guiding directive around what would be an appropriate business meal. So if the council wanted to see something, then we would need to add that to the policy, as in when we talk about an appropriate expense, giving that some parameters, because there isn't one that specifically exists now.
Well, then my feedback on that point is we definitely need some sort of parameters so it's not just open season on meals.
Yeah. Thank you. And it did trigger in me, I did remember the thing that I wrote down, and I think it's a little bit in line, Councillor Nagel, with what you described. In terms of the mileage, meals, and also for some, in some cases accommodations, the National Joint Council or the CRA, they usually say, here's a recommended amount, breakfast, lunch, dinner, here's the mileage, and here's the general accommodations. And I do think there's a lot of value in working through an organization like that to set that up. And I'm a big fan of what you just described as well, is just go to the per diems and just set what those amounts are. You're away for a full day travel, you get X for breakfast, X for lunch, X for dinner. If you want to eat really expensive, then you're going to pay for some of that yourself. If you want to eat super cheap, then that's your discretion as well. It also is low process. There's no need to generate receipts and track all of that. This is some of what Councillor Reid was also mentioning, is you can eliminate some of the administration around those expenses under that parameter as well. So we can give that some further consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Genung.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to build on what Councillor Nagel was saying about per diems. I do like that idea. Keep it, that's in line with my comments around keeping it simple. So I would put my support behind that too. And I just wanted to flag for council that we are currently tracking and reporting online the quarterly expenses of council. So that's all on there right now. So if you want to go to our website and see what I spent in Q1, it's all outlined there already.
Okay, thank you. It looks like that wraps up the comments around the table. I have a few here. This was originally stemming from a notice of motion of mine, I believe, from May 8th I have here. And I believe, and I thank council for supporting this. I think it was something that needed some attention, mostly just because it was an old policy that hadn't been revised in a while and could use some work. The language I used that I have here was, it was intended to increase the detail of elected official expenses reported on our website for public perusal. And that was the essence of what I was trying to get to, which was I'm not looking to make a bunch of prescriptive changes here. I like the simplicity aspect. I like the per diem thing we've been talking about. It all stemmed from a resident pointing out something expense related to me, and I said, well, let's just go on the website and check out what the reporting has to say about it, and I thought our level of reporting on that was either zero or next to zero. It certainly wasn't to my satisfaction, and so it was more about bringing expenses to the scrutiny of the public, and that being the best policy. I think we all have one boss, one person to report to, and that's the general public on our expenses, and I would leave it up to each member of council to defend their own expenses. And so I do like where we're moving here. I want to keep it simple. I just want to keep it transparent, and I'm pleased to hear that expenses have been brought to the website in a more forthright manner that's easy to find. And my only other comment was we talked about, Mr. Darracott talked about during our budget task force talks, we went over a few different ways of reporting budget line item details, and I know there's a few different levels of reporting that we've talked about, and I think that plays the same with our council online reporting. I like that we can move to I think it's level 2 or 3 from wherever we were, level 1, which just gives a little more detail into what's going on with the expenses. We don't need each I don't know, entree line item for a meal, but it would be nice to see broken down between each councillor, as Mayor Genung talked about, and just have a little bit more detail and quick access for the public. So I think we're on the right track here. I like what the tables had to say, and I thank the CAO for bringing this to our attention midway through as we make changes in this department.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wilson. Just a note here, I think one of the important parts of the expense is the rationale, or the disclosure is the rationale piece, which is what part of business were you actually conducting here. And I think that's where we can certainly improve and add to our, I traveled to Edmonton again, like I said, for this purpose, to meet with Minister X. And then the public can not only see that money was expended, but they can see and understand what the activity associated with it was. I think will be a really good improvement, both for just general openness, but also connecting the work that council does to those expenditures.
I fully agree on that point as well. It looks like we've generated a little bit more discussion. Councillor Fedeco?
One more quick question, I guess. What can we expect from obviously all of our comments that we just had, suggestions? Is this coming back for a formalized vote, and when can we expect to see that?
Yeah, thank you. So the idea here is that we'll take the feedback we got here, we'll devise a draft policy that will come back to another committee of the whole, where it will then be a little bit more refined, get some more feedback from council, and then assuming council is comfortable with that, it would come forward to a future council meeting. I would suspect we would want probably about 3 weeks to a month, so early October, for us to bring back a draft of the policy. And then as soon as council felt like we had a policy that they were ready to support, we could bring that to a council meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Nagel.
Sorry, just totally random thought that's come to mind. Within the organization, what's the current policy or culture around like team building lunches at the lower levels of the town of Cochrane, the boots on the ground workers, as we like to refer to them as?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would refer to those kind of activities as staff development, where you're engaging, recognizing, team building, those types of things. And they do happen. Right now they are associated with, each department has a budget associated with those activities, to the birthday pizza party, or birthday cake, or an employee recognizing a long service, taking them for lunch or something like that. So the culture around that, I think, is, in my opinion, healthy. It happens. It's not excessive. We are working to build into our own processes. I think building from this is a specific identifiable line item that would say staff development is X, and these are the types of activities that are happening under that. We don't currently have it delineated to that specificity. I don't know, Lisa, maybe if there's anything you'd like to add to that. I could feel you going for your button there.
Oh, please, Ms. Almond.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I think it's probably safe to say that we have a very, very low budget for team development within the organization, because it actually doesn't really sit at the departmental level. Our recognition program for our staff, where we value and recognize our staff, actually sits in the HR budget. that is not a high ticket item. Professional development, that we're definitely trying to get that equal across the organization, because it's similar to council where there's no defined amount. So some departments ask for nothing and some ask for a little bit. But I think the main point that I wanted to make is it's actually very minimal, that very minimal team development happens. Most of it is on site in a meeting, bring your own brown bag, look at our location. We use this location quite a bit. It is very minimal. Okay.
Yeah, my thought on the matter is I think that can be very healthy for organization. And when you bring this policy back, I'd be interested in seeing some sort of options and consideration for that, because I imagine there might be some departments where it's happening a lot, and some departments where it's literally never happening. And I think it'd be kind of a cool thing for us to have an annual or semi-annual sort of. Like, well, I'll leave it to you to prepare options and how much it would cost and what we can do for.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I do think it is, I think it's actually critical in an organization to have that function of connection, recognition, all of those pieces. And we are working to build that. I would say I think it's separate of this policy. This policy is specific to council expenses, but we can do some work, and likely I could say perhaps even be prepared when we do some budget deliberations to delineate that more clearly and talk about that.
Okay, so the final summary of my thoughts of this whole discussion: as stringent as possible for us at the top, and some opportunities for team development at the bottom.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like that wraps up that discussion. Did you receive everything you needed, Mr. Derricott? from
Yeah, thank you so
council?
much. It's been really, really helpful. As usual, we didn't want to run off and build a policy that didn't necessarily align with council's feelings on the matter, and so we felt like best to have this broader conversation. This has certainly helped me gather some thoughts that I think will be reflected in a draft policy that council can expect to see soon.
Excellent. We look forward to it. Thank you very much. Thank you. I almost skipped ahead before. If we does the round table need a break, or can we proceed to the? I really was, but does anyone need a break, or can we get right to our traffic report that I'm so excited about? Just go? Okay. So we'll bring up Mr. Heineman, who has a traffic construction report that anybody that leaves their house on a daily basis or reads social media knows that traffic is a current hot topic in Cochrane, and we're all excited to hear what's going on in that department. Take it away, Mr. Heineman.
Yeah, good evening, Deputy Mayor Wilson and council. Obviously, you've heard a lot about traffic. I'm fairly certain of that. I wanted to start with some good news, though. We did do a social media update this evening, just on the progress of Highway 1A. Of course, you were all here, so you likely have not received that. But yesterday, we indicated that 85% of the project and the paving was completed. This evening, we got an update that 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Avenue intersections have all been paved, and the only paving that's remaining is Center Avenue, as well as the eastbound lanes of Highway 1A, which will be completed outside of peak times tomorrow. And then the line painting will be completed by the weekend. So we're very happy to see the progress on that project. That being said, we understand there's quite a number of community concerns with that. And in terms of the presentation tonight, I thought it would be best, and certainly look for your feedback on this, to provide a bit of an update on what our plan was to start, because I think there's lots of questions in the community. What was the plan and why was so much of the road network closed at one time? I can certainly let you know right now that was not our initial plan. I can outline how that occurred, why that occurred. Some of the feedback that we received, obviously you've heard a lot of it. There's been some on social media, but there are some specific ones that I'd like to highlight as well. I'd like to perhaps discuss our path forward, and then certainly give you an opportunity for questions and answers. So I don't know if that works in terms of council's preference. Again, I'm happy however council wishes to proceed.
I see nodding heads around the table. Please proceed. We'd love to hear that.
All right. Well, in terms of our plan, I think best laid plans and good intentions, sometimes they change. And certainly our plan, as you recall, with Highway 1A was initially intended to be completed last fall, and then that was not complete. Following when we met with the contractor this year, we were assured that this work would be done by July. As part of our planning, we then planned with the Center Avenue closure, which was anticipated to be in early August. If you recall, I had sent you a message at the end of June indicating that the closure was imminent and that we were planning ahead. With the Center Avenue closure, there were, once they did some of the work in the east end, there was some additional work that was required to install the stormwater infrastructure once they got into the ground. So that project was delayed, making that move to August 30th. Again, we did delay the closure of the Center Avenue intersection, understanding how critical that is to our community. I did meet with the project team for Highway 1A in June as we were looking at the progress of that project, understanding that we were supposed to be completed in July. We were not happy with their progress to date. I indicated that it was critical that they had that project completed prior to Labor Day weekend. We understand the importance of that community event for Cochrane and the number of people that come to our community, as well as the regional traffic that also impacts the community. We also understood the importance of back to school and getting all the kids to our schools safely. So I was assured at that time in June that the project would be complete prior to Labor Day. Subsequently in August, we met with them, understood that they weren't going to meet that timeline. And there were discussions that there would be further delays that would push this project into next year. I said that was completely unacceptable. We had some difficult discussions with the contractor and indicated that it was essential that this project get complete, that this was a critical project for our community. And they indicated, based on some of their staffing, that they would be able to proceed over the Labor Day weekend, and asked if we would accept that. We did accept that, said it was critical for this to get done. However, the challenge in that was we've got multiple contractors we're working with. We have the Center Avenue. So the Center Avenue was closing on August 30th. I believe that was last Wednesday. And subsequently, they were mobilizing, getting ready for the closure, or excuse me, the paving, which impacted the traffic throughout Wednesday and then all the way up until this morning. So again, our focus and the decision of why to proceed was simply not to have this project proceed into, or excuse me, delayed and perhaps not get it completed this year. We think that the paving project is instrumental to our traffic plan, to moving traffic. You could already see some of the significant improvements that were out there this morning. I was out there at 6:30, and the volume of traffic going through that area was quite significant. So again, it was important for us to proceed. We did coordinate with the schools. We had conversations with the Lions Club, understanding the potential impacts on their event. All were supportive of us moving forward, and we felt it was critical to proceed. Again, I think it's a statement that we've been using quite a bit: short-term pain for long-term gain. I think we're going to begin to see the long-term gain as we are now getting the roadworks for this project complete. I want to emphasize that there is still additional work that is required, but my message to the contractor was to get out of the way and have the remaining work that was outside of the road network so we could move traffic. I also didn't want buses in the situation that we encountered last week. So that gives you a little bit of what our initial plan was, how that plan changed. And then what I wanted to touch base on before is some of the potential impacts. And they're important because I think we need to acknowledge them. First and foremost, I think 3rd Street. You may have heard the Plant Place, Brianna, and her business was impacted. I'd like to clarify that this was completely unintentional, where the contractor paving had some equipment and was blocking the access to 3rd Avenue. We needed to do better communication and provide enhanced notice or notification to these businesses. They were certainly impacted, so I would recognize that as something that certainly we need to improve in the future as well. We heard quite a bit from people providing comments on emergency services. I would comment that we did have a coordinated effort. Our emergency services team did participate in this. I will openly acknowledge that just based on the volume of traffic that we were dealing with, that it did impact response times. However, we did look at specific communities that would be impacted, being Glen Eagles, Cochrane Heights in the East End. We did also proceed with mutual aid with Rocky View County, who has a fire hall on Highway 1A that could assist in the event of an emergency. So we were working through that, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. The other portion, again, I'll go through just some of the other comments that we received and then share the path forward and then open it up because I'm sure you've got questions. Was we heard a lot about paving at night and why was paving at night not occurring. I'd like to clarify that that was not in the scope of the contract. Of course, we signed this contract over 2 years ago. It does have additional costs and delays in terms of getting the equipment prepared. They were mobilizing getting that equipment. Safety is an issue. I realize that there are other paving projects that proceed at night. However, I would note that we did have a fatality on this site last year. There was also a major incident where a flagger was hit and several near misses. So certainly safety is at the forefront of our decision making. And then the adjacent community, when we were working through the evening, we have to take them into consideration as well. So we did not proceed with paving at night and did not feel it was, we had the opportunity to do so. In terms of the path forward, I just want to touch on that before opening it up for questions. I think it's important here in terms of the lessons learned. We are going to review this situation. We did have multiple major projects occurring at one time, and we understand that it had impacts on the community. I would like to recognize our communications team. They did an excellent job, but we also have to recognize how we better communicate, how we have better signage in the future. I think as we proceeded through this weekend, our communications were much more effective than at the initial stages last week. We have to have better coordination with the contractor and eliminate these situations where we have multiple projects and having as many portions of our road network closed at one time. So that concludes my presentation and the update, but of course I'm happy to answer any questions that Council may have, as I'm sure you have many, given the feedback that you received.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have comments around the table. Councillor Federico to start, please.
Thanks for the update. I think it's important that you got this messaging out, and a big thank you because I was a person who asked you a couple questions over the weekend and you were quick to respond and find me some answers. I wanted to say, thankfully, that flaggers were, I think, used on Friday to kind of be able to step in and get some traffic moving. And I think that's important to realize that everybody understands that it's short-term pain for long-term gain, but at the end of the day, people are starting to get really, really frustrated. And so in any kind of way that we can start to move traffic outside of the box and paying attention to what is actually happening on the ground and not sitting up in an office or not even being on site is really important. That communication piece has to improve so that we can make improvements as we go at particular times of traffic. When it comes to the emergency services, I did see the video that was released. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to see out of that was more knowledge to residents and to people driving as to what to do in an emergency case when there's traffic on either side of you and you can't move. That's the messaging that I think emergency services could do, could at least help to get out there, is what do you do? What if you're slammed and there's, you know, somebody in the left lane, somebody in the right lane, like where do you go? What is the best way? And I think if that's a graphic or it's a video, rather than just us saying, you know, hey, we hope you stay safe out there, that's not quite the messaging I was looking for, but more, what do you do? Get out of the way, pay attention, that kind of stuff. Move to the right wherever you need to go into the ditch. Let's just get out of the way. And then lastly, when it comes to the businesses, this one's a hard one for me because it's not just a lack of communication, but I think I would like to at least have some sort of conversation of what kind of compensation might be looked at. This is a second business in less than 6 months has been impacted due to some sort of road construction project that they were unaware of. I believe Vintners was one, this one's the second one.
If I can just clarify, and certainly not to trying to take away, in the, on the Railway Street, there were other businesses that were impacted.
Yeah.
I've been in touch with them as well, and I'm planning to meet with the groups on Third Street. So again, there's multiple businesses that are
Yeah,
impacted.
sorry, I didn't just mean those ones. It's just those are the names that came to mind. But I think that rather than just saying sorry at this point, I think we need to maybe step into a place and find out exactly, you know, is it a week worth of revenue and you divide it up to what that would look like? I think that olive branch goes a long way. I mean, business owners right now, I feel for them. We've got construction happening all over the place, and you look at some of these businesses, even if you can possibly get into the business, it's a complete nightmare, and you're not going there. There is lost revenue that we have to consider overall, and we have created an entire project where we've practically ripped up almost every street in Cochrane at the same time. So it's not to say that we're going to pay every business, but I think that the ones that were specifically impacted by being forced that they could not open, that's a very different case, right? So I'd like to at least open up that conversation rather than just saying, sorry, we'll do better. Because we've already done that once and now it's happening again, right? So just my 2 cents on that one.
Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Nagel, please go ahead.
Thank you for the update. The traffic situation was pretty crazy in Cochrane this past weekend. I knew it was bad, and then I went down there for the rodeo this weekend, and then my experience, I went to Ducks after going to the rodeo, and when I went to leave, I tried to go one way, and I was like, oh, I know, I'll go through Center. I was like, oh, Center's still closed. And then I went another way, and then that was still closed. And then basically, I don't know if I was missing something, but it looked like downtown Cochrane had one way in, one way out. And there was like extreme road rage happening all over the place. It was pretty insane. So I'm glad we're talking about it today. Am I understanding correctly? So the Center Avenue project got extended because of things we discovered once we got under the ground, but then also the paving on 1A was delayed from July until like now. So the contractor's delaying of the pavement, what are the consequences for that to the contractor?
We are having discussions with the contractor moving forward. Again, we'd have to review the contract in terms of the exact issues, because we've had a number of issues throughout the Highway 1A project. I can't specify or put specific remedies to that, but of course those are part of our discussions moving forward, because we've had a number of delays on this project.
Yeah, it's like myself as a councillor, and I think members of the public feel the same. It seems like in these construction projects, not just in Cochrane but all across Alberta, contractors can just say, "Oh well, it's delayed and it's over budget, and too bad," and then the taxpayers just left with the problem. Are there legal options and remedies available to us that?
We've had some preliminary discussions with our legal counsel, and we have also discussed they do put a bond up. So as part of that discussion that we had in August, we did talk about pulling their bond, and certainly I think that was something that they didn't want us to pursue. So that encouraged them to mobilize and get additional crews from other projects to get this completed.
Is the size of the bond public information?
I don't have that right at my fingertips, but it is a contract, so I'd have to get back to you on that. But
okay. And then if I'm I want to try and get a good scale of, or good understanding of the scale of the problems caused by the delay of the contract, because like the story I just explained, where it felt like it was one way in, one way out, it really felt it was because I couldn't turn on to 1A, because in multiple attempts to get out of downtown Cochrane, I wanted to turn on to 1A, but it seemed like the only way to do that was to turn right onto 1A and then go through construction traffic and then go up through Glen Eagles to come all the way back into Cochrane. And would that have been solved if this paving issue was taken care of in July?
oh, certainly it would have been, because we are having intermittent closures. We know that there were a number of people in Cochrane Heights that were impacted as they were doing some paving of the eastbound lanes in front of Fifth Avenue, and then there was intermittent closures. So we did receive a number of complaints from people who have said, I can't get into Cochrane Heights, how am I gonna get home? So again, this is where we need to review the situation, the lessons learned, and ensure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, but from my perspective, it's not just a matter of not just happening again. Like, I would like the responsible party for this to have some sort of consequence. If the responsible party for this is the contractor, I would like us to fully explore that as much as possible.
I think just adding to what Mr. Hyman said before, we're absolutely exploring our contractual ability to hold the contractor accountable.
Okay, great.
Thank you. On to Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also want to pick up where Morgan left off. Having been involved in some construction project, obviously nothing of this size, but, building a university residence or modifying or building a building that I'm currently in right now, we had penalties in that. And there were bonds associated with that. And while the contractor wasn't happy about it, we exercised that right. And so I like Morgan, think we need to look at a financial penalty against this contractor or contractors in terms of some way, because this was inappropriate in terms of just that weekend, that July or June to August kind of shift. But as you referred, Drew, there are probably other examples and many other examples where this contractor hasn't been responsible. I know from these financial penalties, based on my own experience, that will bring, they will work weekends, they will work evenings, where if there hadn't been any penalty, it doesn't bother them at all. So I, like Morgan, think that they really need to pursue that, and I'm glad to hear, Mike, that is the case. I have two other questions, well, maybe three. One was a compliment that Marty picked up on, and that is the flag people really made a difference. If we didn't have to look at those lights and those people were just flagging people through based on the traffic that was actually there, that made a big difference in terms of moving traffic through. And so if we are continuing with this project for any length of time, I think we would suggest to the contractors that was an appropriate move. The other is that you talked about coordination with a contractor. It just seemed to be, I mean, again, I'm not looking to point fingers at administration, but there just seemed to be a complete miss there in terms of, I don't know if the contractors weren't responding to what you were saying or what was going on, but it just seemed that like one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing, just from what you could see on the road, right? And then the last thing I wanted to say or ask was, what are the timelines for the Center Street completion, and how confident are you that they're going to be done on time? I recognize it's a different contractor, right?
It is a different contractor. It's a 4-week project, so we're hoping by the beginning of October that it will be open. Again, we're working, I know they were making significant progress this past weekend. So we were receiving updates, and I am confident in this contractor that they will get that work done, and Center Ave will be open, and some of the traffic headaches that we've experienced will be behind us. Beyond certainly the project, though, on Highway 1A and 22. But I think the temporary roundabout is functioning very, very well. It was the first day of school. This is the first time in my time with the town that we didn't have multiple concerns based on school traffic.
Right.
And I think that's certainly a step ahead, and we are taking incremental steps to move this forward.
Can I ask a supplemental question?
Absolutely.
So then on the Center Street project, so not only, is it water and sewage just going in under whatever that Main Street
On First
is?
Street, Main Street, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so they were replacing a water line this past weekend. They're doing the sewer as well, or excuse me, the stormwater. And that's to enhance there's been quite a bit of development in the East End and enhance stormwater connections. If you recall from last year's budget, those were 2 projects.
Right.
We didn't want to go into that area twice. So this is where we're trying to make it sure it's coordinated, and we delayed the closure to try and make sure that it was closed the shortest time period or possible for residents.
So what will Center Street look like after all of this? So we taking down all those trees? Is the curb coming out? Is it gonna be wider?
Yes, we're gonna have a wider 2 lanes in each direction
2
on
lanes
Center.
each direction, no parking on the street?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the wall, how is that coming along, that project?
The wall is coming along well. We anticipate that later this year that will be complete. In terms of the full signage on the wall, that we'd probably wait until early next year to do any sort of grand unveiling of the signage, but we're confident in the work. There's scaffolding up there, but if you go up to Cochrane Heights, you can see the work behind, and they're making good progress.
Okay, thank you.
So that's a separate contractor to the Highway 1A contractor. So we have 4 major contractors working in our community right now.
Yeah, so again, just overall, aside from what would appear to be a negative concern about all of this, I had said private to my council members that I really appreciate all the efforts that you have, again, referring to what Marnie had said, where you made yourself available on a Saturday coming. I recognize you don't live in our community and made the point of being here, being a part of that, and I recognize it's a team effort, and you've acknowledged that, but your particular efforts have been recognized, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. On to Councillor Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Heineman, for explaining everything that's been going on. I know people will be keen to hear it. It was really good to see this morning that the schools didn't have problems getting to school, but this afternoon it was really lined up again on the highway. Did they stop the project in the morning to allow the buses through?
Yes, we asked the contractor to get out of the way for peak times, but it was backed up this afternoon.
Yeah, before we came up here, it was really lined up again.
I
on
did
the
receive an email from Rocky View Schools Transportation Group, and they just identified some challenges with the new Cochrane Christian Academy with some of the work down there. They said everything with the Tri-School site went quite well. We're continuing to monitor that though, and certainly see what happens for the first week and what changes we need to make.
Good. I wondered about the flag people. I hear that there was a lot, but on Friday it didn't seem like there was anybody directing the traffic anywhere, and everything was at a standstill. Did they add some more flag people after that?
I want to give some credit to the contractor. We were in regular contact with them over the last period of time, trying to ensure that they moved this forward, had the right resources. I know their president was in town this weekend as well to observe and make sure that they were getting through this and delivering on this project. So they had more resources they pulled in.
Well, it's good. Friday was the beginning of the long weekend, and it was a terrible day. I think that was all. Yeah, and the blocking of the access. They do this work all the time, so it's unfortunate to hear they would block somebody's access. And hopefully they can make up for that.
Yeah, it's that's certainly the area that I'm most disappointed in is impacting those businesses. The construction, I can share with council, I have gotten to know a number of the residents along there. I have a gentleman who calls me on a regular basis to share the progress or lack of progress from the contractor and some of the things he's observing. So we're just certainly happy to get this, the paving completed. We need the balance of the project to be completed this year. And then we are going to be working through some of these items that you've brought up this evening.
Okay, thanks for all the info.
Mayor Janung.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the update today. Really appreciate it, and I'll echo the sentiments of my colleagues that have appreciated the efforts of yourself and administration and all the team that is behind bringing and delivering upon these crucial upgrades to our infrastructure network. And I'm not going to repeat all of what's been said, but I do think some key learnings, and you mentioned a few of them, but from my point of view, I think council must have, and I think we referred to it as that triangle. Mr. Derricott and I were talking about it last week of time. I can't remember the 3 points of the triangle, but one of them is increased costs, and in this case, I'm talking about the 24-hour implementation of on these types of infrastructure projects, that we should have the option when we approve these types of contracts to have that in at the beginning, and then we'll, you know, and maybe that was something that administration had done previously, but I think having that discussion at the council bench too would be good to be able to reflect on in the future when we're, and I'm, in my notes here, I've got, like, you know, we're gonna have to get good at delivering upon these types of projects, because we're gonna have more of them. As we grow as a community, the complexity and the expense of some of the projects that we're going to be undertaking are, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So I'm happy to hear that we're learning and evolving and improving. And again, this is, I'm not making excuses at all, but as we move from a smaller community to a mid-sized community, these are some of the growing pains that we're going to have to encounter. And I'm not making excuses for what's going on, but I do want to see some of those increased costs, I guess, in some of the contracts come to council that we can vote on. Yep, let's do 24 hours and get this one done, and we're gonna bite the bullet and pay extra for it. Some of the communication, and I appreciated the updates and the emails and all of the communication out to in the various avenues. One of the things that I think we could do better in the future is notify residents on the action plans that exist for emergencies. And I know we could get into details in each community, and it's going to be different for, like you said, Cochrane Heights or Glen Eagles, but I've had questions from residents about, do they exist in the first place, and just questioning the abilities of our organization to be able to deliver upon that. And when I say, and I've always said, yes, we have action plans to evacuate, or if this happens, then we go into that. That always brings some calmness and grounds people a little bit, and just, I think, doing a better job in communicating that with residents, that we actually do have, you know, and you referenced in an email to council on the weekend about, you know, you've talked to the RCMP and they know not to divert traffic through Cochrane if there was an event on Highway 1. You mentioned in your report about liaising with, you know, and having partnerships with Rocky View County or the City of Calgary for mutual aid. Like, people knowing that exists is, I think, a big calming effect on, okay, I get that we're stuck in traffic, but what if? So knowing that we have some of those plans in place. And I agree with Councillor Nagel and Councillor Reid on the contractor accountability. I understand that's underway, so I won't go into that. But I guess I look forward to October-ish. I'm not going to put the date down when, you know, and we're already seeing improvements with the 1A being 85% paved, hopefully 87% or whatever it is today. I haven't been out there yet, but or since this morning. But as we complete these much needed projects, we'll actually see the fruits of some of the pain that we're going through right now. And a lot of the people I've talked to, while they're frustrated and concerned, other than outside of the points that I've raised, understand that we have to go through some of this to get to the greener pastures of better traffic. And this council was given a strong mandate from this community to improve on traffic. We're doing that. I'm happy. One of the things I've said to people too is, and you've broken it down very well this evening, we had a plan in place. It didn't come to, you know, didn't unfold the way that was intended for all the reasons that you've outlined. But if we were, and some people were saying, well, let's delay all of these until the 1A and 22 interchange is done, which is another project happening in our community out of our control that we've been waiting on forever. And if we were to do that, we would never catch up. We have to act on some of these projects. Did it unfold the way we wanted, and is it the best scenario? No. But we can't wait. We have to act. So I look forward to October and moving through our community a little better. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid has an addition.
Just one additional thought, and I don't mean to belabor the point, and I appreciate the rest of the council being patient with me. But the mayor referenced the 1A 22 project. I know that that project is separate to anything that we're doing, but I understood that you were in close contact with that project, and wondering if you could give us an update. Is that, so for example, is the current structure, the traffic circle and as it is that what we're going to see through the winter, or will there be a right turning lane off of 1A up to Sunset, which I had thought earlier was something that was going to come sooner than later?
Councillor Reid, what you will see is the three-legged roundabout will be continue. So that's the leg from the north, the leg from the west, and the south. But what we will see by later this fall is the fourth leg. So they will bring that up, and then eventually they're going to take the lights out at highway at the current intersection, and then it will just be the roundabout. And then with the roundabout having moved out of those areas, you can already see them working on the area adjacent to the bridge over the railway tracks. So that's the platform in the area where they'll be starting to do their works. Like, again, this is a very complex project, and I hope people, as they're seeing it unfold, because here's another example of a project that we anticipated starting much earlier. And of course, they've made some great progress. I give a lot of credit to the contractor in this case, but if you looked at west of the interchange, TC Energy is working very diligently to upgrade the pipeline in that area. So there's a lot of work going on here, but my sense certainly is that by getting the opening these areas where they can put the structures in, the bridge structures, we'll have a four-legged roundabout for an extended period of time, and that will provide them the space in which they need to work and get those works done, and then they will sequence development of that project from that period. But for an extended period of time, later this year and probably throughout next year, it's going to be the four-legged roundabout that will be operating in our community.
And do you envision that, Drew, as being a little more efficient than what it is right now?
Well, I do. I think that was August 10th when that went into operation, and I was holding my breath to see the outcome, and I've been very impressed with the movement of traffic. Certainly today I observed there was a bit of a backup in Heartland, but there was not the backup coming from Sunset as our largest community. So again, I think it's functioning very well, and I'm confident that when they put the fourth leg, we'll see even further improvements in that. Again, we are getting into the winter months, so you know, I've anecdotally seen some comments about, oh, well, wait till winter. Well, there's highway maintenance. I'm just impressed to date.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Federico, you have an addition for us.
Yeah, just one last comment. Tomorrow is going to be the real day of what we see because all schools in. So keep in mind today was just a staggered entry day. So half our schools had half the population in them. So tomorrow is going to be the real test. And if you do hear of any challenges, I'm sure that we will hear that from you if you hear anything else from Rocky View Schools of how we can pump out that message as well. Please let us know so that we can let our social media contacts know that this might be something that they should expect.
Thehank you, Councillor Federico. In the update from Rocky View Schools, they did say that I think grade 10 through 12 go in tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot more traffic tomorrow. So again, it's something that we're keeping track of and observing, and then being prepared to pivot as things move.
Okay, I guess that leaves the chair. I'm not going to belabor any points we've already heard. I had two questions written down that we didn't quite touch on, and so maybe I'll just throw them both out there. That might be the same answer for both. The most disappointing part of the project for me was the First Street and Center closure, as you alluded to, Mr. Hyndman, about, I believe it was supposed to happen in early August, and it ended up being September, which was truly bad timing for a lot of different reasons. My two questions are key learnings from administration on what can we do better there, and then also where did council fail? And I think maybe we touched on that with Mayor Genung. Did we not anticipate delays with timings? I don't know. What can council do better in the future in your estimation, if that's not a rhetorical question?
No, I think key learnings for us is we try and we prepare a budget document, and and prepare a plan for these projects. And I think it's important for us to have contingencies, not just in terms of the overall cost of these projects, but I think contingencies in terms of schedule. And having these projects all run into one another, I want to give credit to Cochrane Now. I did have a conversation with them, and certainly the perfect storm was the situation. We have Labor Day weekend, back to school, the closure of Center as one of our critical road networks, and then the paving. I want to avoid that situation ever occurring again. So that would be the key learning. Again, I don't think I can specifically look at council and say that council should have done something differently. We're entrusted through the approval of the budget to plan, coordinate, and implement these projects. I guess all I would ask is a bit of understanding in terms of the circumstances around this, and appreciate the opportunity to discuss it tonight. But beyond that, I can't look to council for anything. I think there were some great ideas in terms of the contract, and that's something that we can explore. But we do get better together, so it's all about having these types of conversations.
Well, thank you for being on the hot seat and being here to take all the criticism that we could lay upon you, and thank you for the update. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
On to our final matter here. I would ask for a motion to go in camera for our final discussion, if anybody wanted to advance that. A motion, there it is, Councillor Flowers, to move in camera. All those in favor? We'll move on to that. I don't know if I announced the time we go out, but I'll announce it when we come back in, I suppose, is the procedure.